So we are amping it up for February. This class is about handstanding. And if you don't have a handstand in your practice, you're in the right place, because what we're going to go over today is a lot of foundational knowledge that you need for your handstands, as well as to give you exercises that can help build your strength to create the balance on your hands. A few things to say about handstanding is it is a lot. It is a lot of weight on your hands, on your wrists, and it does take a lot of time to build the strength in your arms, your upper back, your body, and your core to get you into finding your balance on your hands. Having hamstring flexibility is a big key here. And you can handstand without being open in your hamstrings, but having more flexibility in the hamstrings will help create a lot more ease. So if you are tighter in the hamstrings and you want to learn handstands, you have to practice opening your hamstrings with the hip essentials classes, the splits guide, and just all of the stretch in your posterior. Another thing I want to note is this is where the secret to asana video really comes into play. So when you handstand, that differentiation of your upper spine and your lower spine, being able to find a cat in the upper back and then a cow in the lower back, is also going to help you find your balance on your hands. Over time, as you build more strength and more body awareness, then you're able to change the dynamics so that you can find an arch in the upper back and find a cat in your lower back. But again, that takes just time and practice. So we're going to go ahead and get started on our mats, and I'm going to have 2 blocks handy for my hamstring stretches. But before we get started into the exercise, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's necessary to find your handstand. So the first thing to note for the handstands are the hand placements, right? The hands are the most important part. So I'm going to measure up hand shoulder width apart. And how do I do that? I basically let my arms hang. From there, I simply take them down to the floor. Where those palms land is the distance and the width of your hands. Most people start their handstands too wide. And while this is okay, it creates if you're very strong, it's doable, but it does create this temptation to bend your elbows outwards to press through strength of the arms into your handstand. And it's a little bit more stable, especially when we start getting into transitions and variations, to take it more narrow and to have really straight arms. The second thing is the spinning of your inner creases forward. So these elbows really have to be able to spin. If you're still working on the spinning, it's going to take you a little bit more time to get this down for your handstands. So the inner creases of the elbows spin forward. My hands are shoulder width apart. Notice my hands. I'm starting to turn them out a little bit so that the fingers face a little bit outwards. And one of the tips I found really helpful from my trainings was to look at your wrist line over here and to adjust it so that when you spin the inner creases of your elbows forward, your wrist line creates this 45-degree angle. So the old way of thought of having your middle finger forward and the fingers really straight forward is kind of out the door these days. These days, the teaching is to relieve a little tension on the arm spinning by turning your fingers slightly outwards so that you have a 45-degree angle in the wrist line. From there, the spinning of the inner creases forward is also easier. Okay? The other thing is your fingertips, your finger pads. So you want to be able to grip down with all of the base of the knuckles, but also the finger pads. And sometimes your finger knuckles might even lift. The middle knuckles might lift like you're trying to claw at the mat. And in the beginning, it feels hard to do this. In the beginning, it's always hard to do anything, but you just want to keep practicing grounding the base of your knuckle pads and gripping with the finger pads. So I'm grounding the knuckles, these, and then I'm gripping with the finger pads. That takes care of our hands. Now, what about the rest of our bodies, right? So handstand really is a full body exercise. And not only does it require a lot of strength, in order to do it more efficiently, having flexibility in your shoulder girdle as well as your back and your hamstrings can help you. Not too much flexibility in the back. If it's too mobile in the back, it tends to get hard to integrate, right? To close the ribs. So let's take a look at the shoulders. My arms are going to be up. This is my handstand, right? Well, sort of. And I'm going to flip my palms up against the ceiling. You guys can do this at home too. I want to find the same kind of form that I just found on the floor. So I'm going to hug my triceps in towards my face, closing these armpits. By that, I mean this is an open armpit and this is a closed armpit. You see how I'm turning it so that it suction cups my armpits, right? And from there, I keep spinning. This is the inner creases of the elbows are spinning towards the back, which would equivalent to spinning forward here, right? It's the same action. So if it helps you, you can even take your hands down, spin it, keep the rotation of the arms, reach the arms up, flat palms, and look up. So my gaze is up between my thumbs, and I want to really memorize this feeling of gaze towards my fingertips. If you have manicured nails, it can help hold your focus maybe, right? Now, the mistake, or not mistake, but what we tend to see as teachers is the shoulder blades draw down the back. Does this form look familiar? It's kind of like your chair pose, right? How many times have you guys heard in class, draw your shoulder blades down your back in a chair pose, or in a warrior one, draw your shoulder blades down your back. We're going to switch all of that patterning up because for our handstands, we want shoulders up to our ears. We're really pushing, okay? Now the biceps, you want to draw them back by your ears. Gaze is up. If all of that feels like a lot, it's going to be a lot upside down, but in the beginning. So as you build more patterning into all of this, of biceps behind the ears, spinning, biceps behind the ears, push up, gaze up, biceps back. As you build all of that and pattern it into your practice, it gets easier and easier. So why do we want to push? Because if we're upside down, and I'm going to use the wall to demonstrate this, because I'll lose it as soon as I start losing it. So if I'm upside down, and I draw the shoulder blades down my back, look, I'm lengthening my ears, right, or my neck. I'm lengthening shoulders away from the ears. It's a lot on my shoulder joint. If I push, then I have a lot more stability, a lot more strength in this. If you think about a stop sign pole, if it starts to lose its integrity and it starts sinking down and it starts softening, it's not going to stand against a hurricane wind, right? But if that stop sign pole is straight up and strong, and then you can't knock it down. So it's the same thing here. We want to really push and straighten this arm so that we have a stable base for our handstands. Okay, so let's move down a little bit. Let's get into the ribs. The ribs, often, when you take your arms up and you look up, the ribs often want to open out and flare out. Yeah, it's what our back bends train us to do. In your inversions, we want to train it to do the opposite. So when we go upside down, and this is where the secret to asana comes back into play, we want to round and push into the floor, right? This is your cat, right? I'm tucking my chin to my chest, and I'm pushing. I want to keep this cat, but I want to look forward. And then from there, I want to find a little arch in my tailbone. It's the same as your down dogs. That's why we push the floor away, and we round the upper back. But then we want to look forward and arch our low back. Why? So that when we do kick up into our handstands, it's not from a flat back like this that we try and lift up, right? We'll have a lot more of a stable base if we protract the upper back, round it, look forward, and then from there we can jump up, right? And to find the hold, I'm still finding a cat in my upper back, but I'm looking forward, and I have a cow. I have an arch in my lower back. Do you see that? So I kind of overdid it, so I was losing my balance. But you see that your cat-cows come back into play in your handstands. You need to first round to integrate the spine, and then arch the tail to find a little bit of balance. When you get stronger, then you can have both points of your ribs and your hip bones tucking under to hold that. And now when we work our core, we're going to be focusing a lot on this because it becomes very difficult to think upside down. So the more you can pattern everything right side up, the easier it gets. Moving on a little bit lower, just as I said a little earlier, are these 2 points. My rib cage point and the points on my hip bone. So if you sit up and you can find the 2 points, these 2 points, I want to close them. So this is our cat, right? And by closing them and drawing my side muscles inwards, I'm finding my core. This is where the type of core work that we use for most of our yoga practice is a very hugged in feeling, almost like you have a corset on and you're trying to hug everything in towards the belly button. By squeezing all of that, that's how we're able to find the strength. What are our legs doing upside down? There's a couple of ways that you can work, but I find that if you can have enough awareness to squeeze your legs together and make them one line, you have a much stronger hold on your handstands. And again, you'll hear so many different ways to learn handstands. The way I'm going to teach you is the way that I first learned mine, which I found to be very effective for teaching most students just learning their handstands. So I'm going to take my legs together. I kind of want to turn diagonally so you can see. And I'm going to squeeze my quads. From the squeezing action of my quads, and you can take your fingers to kind of make sure that your quads are active, you'll feel lift in your knees. And so my legs are really active, and see how my feet are stepping down into the mat. I'm closing my rib cage, and I'm tucking my tail under, I'm squeezing my butt. This is a straight handstand, except you're standing on your feet. When you get upside down, it's the same thing. We're not going to be learning straight handstand today because that is very difficult to find in the beginning. We're going to be finding your chair pose first, right? So this shape, we're going to be finding this. Same thing, my feet are flexed. I'm squeezing my inner thighs together so that I don't really want to be able to take my fingers through, okay? So I'm squeezing, I have a little arch in my low back. I'm going to close my ribs and reach my arms up. This is a shape that we're trying to find upside down today. One of the best tips I learned was to have your feet flexed, because when you flex your feet, it's as though you're stomping the brakes on falling. So I'm going to teach that to you. In the circus world, they point, point, point. It's up to you how you want to train it, but in the beginning, for me, flexing my feet helped me find balance better. We're going to go ahead and get started with some exercises. And to start, we're going to warm up our hamstrings, because when the hamstrings are warm and happy, Handstands are much more easy.